Next, China test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean this Wednesday, stirring security concerns in a region already tense over Beijing's territorial claims and rivalry with the US. The issue, of course, the status of Taiwan, as well as China's disputed claims to other parts of the South China Sea.
On Wednesday morning in China, residents woke up to a rare announcement on state television that an intercontinental ballistic missile had been fired into the Pacific Ocean. Details were revealed by Chinese authorities after the test launch, without specifying whether it was launched from a submarine or on land.
This is a routine test launch in our annual training plan. It's in line with international law and international practice and is not directed against any country or target.
China's neighbours, Japan, said they had not been given any notice and that Beijing's military build-up, as well as their lack of transparency, were a serious concern. Similar statements were also given by Australia and New Zealand. This type of intercontinental ballistic missile is one of the most powerful weapons in the world and can transport nuclear warheads. China hasn't carried out such a test since the 1980s.
It's extremely rare, but China is undergoing a pretty substantial expansion of its nuclear arsenal, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, that is, missiles with the range to hit basically anywhere in the world, but in particular the United States. And so it is perhaps not surprising to see that China needs to test that capability to make sure that it's reliable.
Beijing and Washington are battling for influence in the Pacific. This test launch could put the question of controlling weapons back on the table. It's a sensitive topic for many countries in the Pacific because of the track record of nuclear weapons testing in the region.
Selena Sykes there, sensitive is how she ended that report. I think that underlines the whole situation. Let's bring in for the analysis Alessio Patalano. Alessio Patalano is Professor of War and Strategy in East Asia at King's in London. Alessio, always a pleasure to have you here on France 24. We appreciate your analysis. The People's Army of China, who are behind this launch, put out a statement earlier saying, basically, nothing to see here, Governor, everything's okay. Well, different words, of course. They said it was within international law and there was no threat. Do we believe that? Do we take solace in hearing that?
Well, first of all, it's always a delight to be back on the platform. I think the first thing to say that on paper they're absolutely right. You know, what they're doing is testing a capability that, in order to be fully operational of operational use, it needs to be tested. If no other reasons, for example, that it tells us something about the PLA's commitment to develop a greater capacity for precision targeting through their own Beidou satellite targeting system. So if no other reason, just for that, you want to make sure that this capability is going to be proven correct. But you are also absolutely right that the context within which this particular test it's taking place is one in which there is an enormous amount of tension already unfolding in the region. Look at it from a broader global perspective. You have a considerable number of exercises taking place that Russia is conducting in the Mediterranean, in North Atlantic and the Baltic regions, as well as in part of the Northeast Asian sector. And China has joined a part of these training and exercises activities. And so this test comes into a context where the Chinese have been particularly active in a way that flexes their muscles. And that obviously has been raising concerns across the region.
So the PRC conducting this test, which we can take at face value, but behind that, of course, there is an element of intimidation, especially on the issue of Taiwan.
I think there is that, but there is also something that needs to be constantly on the back of our mind. The rocket force was at the center of a number of scandals and some changes at the very top of the organization. It was also revealed some time ago that some missiles were not properly stored, they were not properly maintained. So there was a reputational element at stake here. And of course, long-range striking capabilities are absolutely central to project that capacity for China to be a credible military power, not just in the region, but in the broader negotiations of a relationship with the United States. So given recent setbacks and scandals, this test comes also in part as an opportunity to reinforce and restate the rocket force is a real component, is a real and serious stakeholder in that strategic game of chess that is unfolding in the broader Indo-Pacific, certainly between China and the United States. And countries like Japan, like South Korea, and realities like Taiwan are all paying close attention to it.
So, clear message to Washington, as you say, but does this raise the temperature then around the South China Sea?
In many respects, it does, because we know that the launch was conducted from Hainan, the island in the South China Sea, where the mobile unit that conducted the test, at least that's what analysts at the moment have come up to focus on as a potential launching site, and not the usual launching site, reminds us something about the fact that the South China Sea is not just a theatre whereby competition is taking place in the space of maritime and territorial disputes, but is also a sub-theatre on its own terms that is particularly significant from a strategic perspective insofar as the broader tensions between the United States and China, and the United States and its partners and China sort of continue to unfold in that part of the world.
Alessio Patalano, thanks again for joining us, Professor of War and Strategy in East Asia at King's in London. Always a pleasure to have you here in France 24. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We're watching, of course, for all